At our family reunion, my father stood up, took the microphone, and said something about me in front of 68 relatives that I'll carry for the rest of my life. We only have one daughter we're proud of. That was it. And when he said it, he was looking straight at my older sister, Vivienne. For 22 years, my family had a name for me. The burden. The premature baby who cost too much. The quiet sister no one defended. The daughter who always sat at the end of the table while Vivienne received the tuition, the praise, the love. What none of them knew, not my parents, not my cousins, not a single person in that crowd, was that 6 weeks earlier, on a Thursday night at my kitchen table, Vivienne got drunk and confessed everything. The money she stole from our parents, the nursing career she never finished, the lies she'd been feeding the family about me since I was 14, and I recorded it. 14 minutes. That was all it took to crack 22 years of silence. Before I tell you what happened when I finally pressed play, take a second to like and you are right now. Now let me take you back to where this story began. To a cold January night in Georgia, when I entered this world 6 weeks too early, and quietly became the debt my family never wanted to pay. I was born on a Tuesday night in January, in a hospital 40 minutes from our house, because the closer one didn't have a NICU. My lungs weren't ready. My heart wasn't ready. Nothing about me was. I spent 3 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit. $86,000 in medical bills. My parents had just closed on their first house 2 months earlier. My father, Robert, was driving trucks for a regional freight company. My mother, Margaret, had quit her receptionist job to stay home with Vivienne, who was 3. I know the exact dollar amount because my mother made sure I'd never forget it. She told the story at every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family gathering where there was an audience. Serafina almost bankrupted us before she even opened her eyes, she'd say. Then she'd laugh. The relatives would laugh with her. And I'd sit there, gripping my fork so tightly my knuckles turned white, wondering how a baby could be blamed for surviving. When I finally came home from the hospital, small, fragile, wrapped in a yellow blanket, my sister Vivienne leaned over my crib and asked our mother a question that became the Clare family's favorite joke for the next 20 years. Can we send her back? Everyone laughed. My dad, my aunts and uncles. Even my grandmother Eleanor, though I would learn later that she stopped laughing long before anyone else did. That question, can we send her back, followed me everywhere. Through every birthday, every report card, every holiday dinner. Vivienne said it when I spilled juice. My father said it when I got carsick on road trips. My mother whispered it to her sister Helen on the phone when she thought I couldn't hear. But I always heard. Growing up, I learned the rules of our family early. Rule 1. Vivienne comes first. Rule 2. If something goes wrong, it's probably Serafina's fault. Rule 3. Don't complain about rules 1 and 2. When I was 10, I won first place in the county writing contest. My English teacher called the house to congratulate my parents. My mother forgot to come to the award ceremony. That same week, Vivienne placed 3rd in a school track meet, and we all went out to celebrate at Olive Garden. I remember sitting in that booth, my certificate folded under the table, waiting for anyone to ask about it. No one did. But it was the Thanksgiving I was 14 that cracked something inside me for good. Vivienne went to my mother with tears in her eyes because she always knew exactly when to cry, and said I had stolen our grandmother Eleanor's gold pendant necklace, the one from her wedding photo, the one she had promised to pass down. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even been in Grandma's bedroom that weekend. It didn't matter. My mother believed Vivienne immediately. I was pulled into the living room in front of 12 relatives and told to kneel and apologize to my grandmother for being a thief. I knelt. I cried. I said I was sorry for something I didn't do. 2 weeks later, the necklace turned up in Vivienne's dresser drawer. My mother's explanation? It must have gotten mixed in with the laundry. No one apologized to me, not my mother, not Vivienne, not anyone. That night, I found my mother's old journal in the hallway closet. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe I was looking for proof that she had loved me once. Instead, I found a line dated the year I was born. Sometimes I wish we'd stopped at one. I read it 7 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves. They didn't. I left home the summer I turned 18. I'd earned a partial scholarship to a state college 2 hours away. Nothing Ivy League. But I was proud of it. I needed my parents to cover the remaining $4,000 a semester. I brought the financial aid letter to dinner like I was presenting evidence to a jury. My father barely glanced at it. My mother didn't look up from her plate. "We've already spent enough on you," she said. "Between the hospital bills, your braces, and that inhaler you needed every winter, we just don't have it." That same month, my parents wrote a check for Vivian's full tuition at a private nursing program. $29,000. No scholarship, no questions asked. So I worked 2 jobs. Barista at 6 in the morning. Data entry at a temp agency until 10 at night. It took me 5 years to finish what should have taken 4. But I graduated with a degree in accounting and 0 debt. Nobody came to my ceremony. I wore my cap alone in a crowd of strangers and their cheering families, and still, I kept showing up. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, I drive 2 hours carrying handmade gifts and desserts that nobody asked for. I slept on the couch while Vivian took the guest room, the one with the quilt my grandmother Eleanor had sewn by hand. I called my mother every Sunday evening. She answered maybe 1 out of every 3 times. I told myself it was enough. That if I just kept trying, something would soften. That belief lasted until 3 months ago, when I learned what my sister had really been doing behind everyone's back. It started in a coffee shop. I was grabbing a latte before work on a Tuesday morning at Dancing Goat's Coffee when a woman waved at me from a corner table. It took a second, then I recognized her. Lauren Price. She and Vivian had been in the same nursing program. "Serafina, right?" she said. "Vivian's sister." She pulled out the chair across from her. "How's Viv doing? I haven't seen her since first semester." I almost corrected her. Vivian had been telling our family she was a registered nurse for 8 years. She talked about patients she'd saved, overnight shifts that drained her, the calling she'd found. "First semester?" I repeated. Lauren's expression shifted. "Yeah. She stopped showing up after October. I figured she transferred." Then she tilted her head. "Wait, your family doesn't know she dropped out?" I set my coffee down very carefully. "I just assumed everyone knew," Lauren said quietly. I drove to work with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and started searching. Piedmont Nursing Institute had a public registry of graduates. I scrolled through every name from Vivian's year. Her name wasn't there. I dug deeper. My parents had paid $29,000 for that program. When a student drops out in the first semester, the school refunds a significant portion of the tuition. Vivian had never returned that money. She'd kept the refund and told everyone she'd graduated. For 8 years, she'd been telling my parents, my grandmother, our entire extended family that she was a nurse. She showed up to holidays in scrubs she bought online. She told stories that sounded real because she'd memorized them from medical dramas. And no one, not a single person, had ever thought to check. The second discovery came from my mother's own mouth. About 2 months before the reunion, I was on one of those rare Sunday calls where Margaret actually picked up. She sounded tired, distracted. Halfway through the conversation, she muttered something she didn't mean for me to hear. "Your father's retirement fund looks thin. I don't understand it. The market's been fine." I'm an accountant. I notice numbers the way most people notice weather. Something in her tone tightened my chest. I asked carefully if she'd looked at the statements recently. "Vivian handles all that," she said. "She set up the online access for us. She's so good with that stuff. You know, being in healthcare, she understands finances." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I called my father's old landline and talked him through logging into his retirement account. He didn't know I was checking. I told him I just wanted to make sure his beneficiary information was up to date. The numbers told a story my family never would. Over 4 years, $47,000 had been transferred out of my parents' retirement fund in small, irregular amounts. $2,000 here, $3,500 there, always to the same external checking account. The routing number traced back to a bank in Vivian's city. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Then I called my mother. I told her as gently as I could that something was wrong, that the losses weren't market-related, that the money had gone somewhere specific. She cut me off before I could finish. "Don't be jealous of your sister, Serafina," she snapped. "Vivian manages that account because she's responsible, unlike some people." She hung up, and that was the moment I understood the truth. Telling them privately would never work. Let me be clear about what was really at stake. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, was 79 years old. She'd built a life on a beautiful property outside Roswell, Georgia, a house she and my grandfather had designed together before he passed. A garden she'd kept blooming for 40 years, and enough savings to leave something meaningful behind. She was updating her will. She'd told the family as much. And in the 2 months before the reunion, Vivian visited her 4 times. 4. My sister, who normally managed 1 visit a year if that, was suddenly the most devoted granddaughter in Georgia. She brought flowers. She brought homemade soup, which I later learned came from a deli and was poured into her own containers. She sat at Grandma's kitchen table, held her hand, and talked about her nursing career. My mother told the family, "Vivian is taking such good care of Mom. She's so selfless." I knew exactly what was happening. Vivian was positioning herself. She wanted her name on the will, the sole inheritor, the golden child's final trophy. If I stayed silent, 3 things would happen. My parents would lose more money they couldn't afford to lose. My grandmother would be manipulated into rewriting her legacy based on lies. And I would lose the last person in my family who had ever truly seen me. I wasn't planning revenge. That word feels too sharp, too dramatic for what this was. I was trying to protect my grandmother from the same person who had stolen from my parents, lied about her education, framed me for theft at 14, and spent 22 years making sure I never had a seat at the family table. But I needed proof, not suspicion, not accounting spreadsheets. Proof that couldn't be explained away, reframed, or buried under my mother's denial. I needed Vivian's own words. 3 weeks before the reunion, I texted her. "Hey, I know things have been weird between us. Can we talk before the reunion? I don't want it to be awkward in front of Grandma." She replied in 4 minutes. "Sure, your place. That should have told me everything." Vivian never came to my apartment. She thought my neighborhood was beneath her. But the reunion was 3 weeks away, and she needed me quiet, cooperative, manageable in front of Grandma Eleanor. A quick visit to pacify the difficult sister, worth the drive. She showed up on a Thursday evening wearing a silk blouse and designer jeans, carrying a bottle of Pinot Grigio. She hugged me at the door, tight, performative, then immediately scanned my apartment with that familiar look of polite pity. "It's cozy," she said. The word dripped. I opened the wine. I poured her glass fuller than mine. Then I set my phone on the bookshelf behind us, screen facing down, recording app already running. Georgia is a one-party consent state. I was that party. We sat at my kitchen table and I started small. "So, how's work?" I asked. "The hospital keeping you busy?" Vivian launched into a story about a patient who had coded during her shift the previous Tuesday. She told it with hand gestures, perfectly timed pauses, the right rise and fall in her voice. She'd always been good at this, making fiction sound like memory. I let her finish. Then I said, as casually as I could, "That's wild. Hey, I actually ran into Lauren Price last month, your old classmate. She said something kind of strange." Vivian's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. "Lauren talks too much," she said. Her voice dropped half an octave. That's when I knew the mask had cracked. I didn't push. I poured more wine. I let the silence do the work. Vivian finished her second glass, then her third. The Pinot Grigio was doing what I couldn't, loosening the bolt she kept screwed tight in public. "Viv," I said quietly, "I'm not judging you. I just want to understand. We're sisters." She stared at me for a long moment, and something shifted behind her eyes. Not guilt, not fear, something worse, contempt. The kind that only shows up when someone truly believes they're untouchable. You want to understand? She said, leaning back. Fine. And then Vivian Clare, the golden child, the beloved daughter, the family's celebrated nurse, started talking. I didn't finish nursing school. Big deal. It wasn't for me. She waved a hand, like she was brushing away a gnat. Mom and Dad's tuition money? They owed me that. For all the years I had to be perfect while you were draining them dry. My chest tightened. I said nothing. You know what I told Mom when you were 14? She continued. That you stole Grandma's necklace. She smiled. Actually smiled. I took it, she said. I needed it gone before Thanksgiving so you'd look bad. And it worked. Every time. She poured herself another glass. Her hand didn't shake. Her conscience didn't flinch. All I ever had to do was cry, she said lightly. And Mom took my side. Always. Then she looked at me. You were so easy to push out of the way, Serafina. You never fought back. You just took it, quietly, under the table. My hands were trembling, my jaw ached from clenching, but I kept my face still. I kept my breathing even, because the phone on the bookshelf was catching every word, and Vivian wasn't finished. The wine had stripped away the last layer. Dad's retirement account, she said, tilting her glass, watching the light bend through the wine like she was admiring a jewel. I've taken about $47,000 over the last 4 years. Small amounts. They'll never figure it out. They think the market crashed. She laughed, a short, bright, careless sound. And Grandma? I asked. My voice was steady, barely. Vivian leaned forward, elbows on the table. Why do you think I've been visiting her? She said. She's rewriting her will. I'll make sure my name is the only one that matters. She held my gaze, then she said the thing that sealed everything. And you? You'll get nothing, just like always. She set her glass down gently. Because in this family I'm the daughter, she said. You're the bill. Not the burden, the bill, like a debt they'd never wanted to pay. 15 minutes later, Vivian yawned and fell asleep on my couch, her shoes still on. I pulled a blanket over her, because even then, even after all of that, she was still my sister, and I didn't know what else to do with that truth. Then I went into the kitchen. I sat in the dark. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording. 14 minutes and 22 seconds. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but something inside me had shifted. Something tectonic, irreversible. Crying felt like moving backward. I played the recording once, all the way through, just to make sure it was clear. Vivian's voice came through sharp and certain. You were always so easy to push out of the way. 14 minutes. That's all it took for 22 years of lies to collapse into a single file on my phone. The question was no longer if, it was when and where. 2 weeks before the reunion, I made a phone call that changed everything. My aunt Helen Whitmore picked up on the second ring. Helen is my mother's younger sister. Quieter, sharper, and the only person in the family who ever looked at me like I was a whole human being, not a footnote. When I was 8 and had pneumonia, she drove 3 hours through a snowstorm to sit by my bed. When I graduated college alone, she was the one who sent flowers. The card had read, I see you, Serafina. Always have. Hey, sweetheart, she said. What's going on? I didn't tell her about the recording. Not yet. I just asked carefully, Aunt Helen, have you ever felt like something was off about Vivian? The line went quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Aunt Helen exhaled slowly. I've been watching your sister for years, Serafina, she said. Something doesn't add up. The career stories, the money, the way she handles your parents. But I could never prove it. She told me she had tried once. 3 years earlier, she'd mentioned to Margaret that Vivian's work stories sounded inconsistent. My mother's response had been immediate and nuclear. She stopped speaking to Helen for 6 months, cut her out of the family group texts, told the cousins Helen was going through something. Your mother will destroy anyone who threatens Vivian's image, Helen said quietly, even her own sister. I closed my eyes. Aunt Helen, I asked carefully, are you handling the slideshow at the reunion, the projector setup? I'm doing the tech for the family photo montage, she said. Yeah, why? If I needed to connect a phone to that projector, I said, would that be possible? Silence again. Then, it's just an HDMI adapter. A pause. Serafina, what are you planning? I might have something the family needs to hear. She went quiet. I could hear her breathing on the line. I don't know what you have, she said finally, but I trust you. I'll make sure the equipment works. 10 days before the reunion, a handwritten envelope arrived at my apartment. Cream-colored stationery, shaky but deliberate handwriting. My grandmother, Eleanor. She still wrote letters by hand. She used to say email was for people in a hurry, and she'd earned the right to take her time. My dear Serafina, the reunion is July 19th. I want both my granddaughters there. I want to see your face. Please come. Love, Grandma. I pressed the letter to my chest like it was something fragile. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom, you got the invitation, Margaret said. Not a question. I did. Good. Now listen. Her voice shifted into the tone I knew by heart, the managerial one, the kind that made instructions sound like favors. You're invited, but behave yourself. She continued without taking a breath. Vivian is giving a speech about her nursing career. Your father is saying a few words. Just sit, smile, and be grateful you're included. I tightened my grip on the phone. I'll be there, Mom. And wear something decent, she added. Last time you looked like you didn't even try. I said nothing. Oh, and Mom is making some big announcements at the reunion, she added, almost casually. Family decisions, important ones. So don't make it about you. She hung up before I could respond. She always did. I sat on the edge of my bed and read Grandma Eleanor's letter again. Then I opened my closet and looked at the white dress I'd been saving for something I couldn't name. Something that mattered. This was Vivian's stage. My parents had cast the roles. She was the star. I was the background extra, meant to be grateful just to have a seat. But I was done following their script. I was bringing my phone, and my own story. The night before the reunion, I sat on my living room floor with my phone and a pair of earbuds and listened to the recording one more time. Vivian's voice filled my ears, close, clear, and cruel. You were always so easy to push out of the way. I heard myself ask about Grandma, my voice thin and careful. Then her again. You'll get nothing, just like always. My hands were shaking when I pulled the earbuds out. I almost deleted it. I want you to know that. My thumb hovered over the trash icon for a full 10 seconds, and in that moment, every year of conditioning screamed at me to keep the peace, to swallow it, to be the good daughter who never caused trouble. But then I thought about my grandmother's letter. I want to see your face. I thought about my father's retirement account, bleeding quietly for 4 years. I thought about my 14-year-old self, kneeling on a living room floor, apologizing for a theft she never committed. I slipped the phone into my bag. That evening, I called Aunt Helen one last time. Is the projector ready? HDMI adapter, external speakers, everything set for the slideshow, she said. Then she hesitated. Serafina, whatever you're doing, are you sure? I'm sure. A long pause. Then I'll make sure it works, she said finally. You just have to plug in. After we hung up, I wrote a letter to my grandmother. Short, honest. I sealed it in an envelope and tucked it into my bag beside my phone. Grandma, I'm sorry if what happens tomorrow hurts you, but you've always taught me that the truth matters more than comfort. I hope you still believe that. I didn't sleep that night, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what morning would bring. I was ready. The Whitmore estate sat on 3 acres of rolling green in Roswell, Georgia, framed by old magnolia trees and a white fence my grandfather had painted every spring until the year he died. Grandma Eleanor hosted the family reunion there every 5 years. This one was the largest yet. 68 people, spanning 4 generations. Long banquet tables draped in white cloth stretched across the back lawn. String lights hung between the magnolias, waiting for dusk. Near the main table stood a projector screen, already set up for the family photo slideshow, Aunt Helen's domain. I arrived early. White dress, hair down, phone tucked into my clutch, heart lodged in my throat. Aunt Helen was adjusting the speaker cables near the projector. When she saw me, she nodded once, calm, steady, then tipped her head toward the HDMI adapter resting on the edge of the tech table. I understood. Guests filtered in over the next hour, cousins I hadn't seen in years, great aunts who pinched my cheeks, Uncle Frank with his booming laugh, kids weaving between garden chairs, chasing each other through the grass. Then Vivian arrived. Red dress, expensive heels, full makeup. She moved through the crowd like a celebrity at a premiere, kissing cheeks, squeezing hands, performing warmth so convincingly I almost believed it myself. She went straight to Grandma Eleanor, wrapping her in a hug that lasted just long enough for 3 different people to take photos. My parents flanked Vivian like bodyguards. Robert in pressed khakis, Margaret in a floral dress, her hand resting proudly on Vivian's shoulder. The perfect trio. I stood near the back, beside the hydrangea bushes, holding a glass of sweet tea I never drank. And Grandma Eleanor, mid-hug with Vivian, looked over her granddaughter's shoulder, found me in the crowd, and gave me a small, sad smile that broke something open in my chest. Dinner was served at 6. Fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, peach cobbler. The reunion spread hadn't changed in decades. People filled their plates, found their seats, and settled into the warm, loud chaos that big Southern families do best. I took my place at the far end of the second table. Nobody had assigned seats, but somehow the family geography always pushed me to the edges. After dinner, my mother stood and tapped a fork against her glass. Conversations faded into silence. "Before we start the slideshow," Margaret announced, "Vivian has something she'd like to share. Some of you know she's been doing incredible work as a nurse. Viv, honey, come on up." Applause followed. Warm. Encouraging. Trusting applause from 68 people who had no reason to doubt her. Vivian walked to the front with the ease of someone who had rehearsed this moment in the mirror. She took the wireless microphone from Aunt Helen's tech table and smiled, the practiced, symmetrical smile that had rescued her from every corner she'd ever been backed into. "Thank you, Mom," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "Nursing has been the most rewarding experience of my life. Just last month, I helped a patient recover from a stroke. She held my hand and told me I saved her life." Murmurs of admiration rippled through the crowd. Grandma Eleanor nodded proudly. 5 minutes of pure fiction, delivered flawlessly. When Vivian finished, the front table rose to its feet. My mother wiped away a single graceful tear, the kind she'd perfected at church. Then a great aunt at my table leaned over and patted my arm. "And what do you do, dear?" Before I could answer, my mother's voice cut across the lawn. "Serafina works in accounting," Margaret said. "Somewhere." Scattered laughter. Vivienne smiled into her wine glass. I felt my face burn, but I kept my hands flat on the table. Not yet. The sun was sinking behind the magnolias when my father stood up. Robert Clare was not a natural speaker. He was a quiet man, years of driving trucks, watching ESPN, and agreeing with whatever my mother told him was true, had shaped him that way. But tonight, Margaret had given him a script. He unfolded the paper she'd slipped into his shirt pocket before dinner. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he began. His voice sounded thin through the microphone. This family means everything to us." He paused. His eyes moved to Vivian, seated at the front table beside Grandma Eleanor. Margaret beamed beside her. He swallowed. "We only have one daughter we're truly proud of." The lawn went still. "Vivian," he continued, "you are our greatest achievement. Everything you've done, your career, your heart, the way you take care of this family, we couldn't have asked for a better daughter." Applause followed, not thunderous, but enough. There was an awkward current beneath it. A few people glanced around. A cousin shifted in her chair. But enough people clapped to make it feel sanctioned. No one looked at me. No one needed to. I sat at the back table, 68 people in front of me. My father's words hanging in the summer air like smoke. We only have one daughter we're truly proud of. He hadn't misspoken. He hadn't been unclear. In front of every aunt, uncle, cousin, and grandparent, he had said that I didn't count. Grandma Eleanor turned slowly in her chair. She found me. She saw the redness in my eyes. Her brow creased with something I hadn't seen in years. Alarm. I slipped my hand into my clutch and felt the hard edge of my phone through the fabric. 22 years. I stood up. I didn't rush. I didn't storm. I rose from my chair the way you do when you've finally made a decision you've been turning over for weeks, slowly, deliberately, like gravity had shifted and standing was the only thing left that made sense. Heads turned. A few cousins whispered. My mother noticed first. Serafina, and Margaret's voice cut low and sharp. Sit down. What are you doing? I didn't answer. I stepped into the space between the two banquet tables. 68 faces followed me, tracking my movement like I was crossing a stage. The string lights had come on. The air smelled like peach cobbler and fresh-cut grass. My heartbeat was so loud I could feel it in my fingertips. Vivian watched me from the front table. Her wine glass froze halfway to her mouth. Confusion flickered across her face, then suspicion, then something I had never seen on my sister before. Fear. I reached the tech table. Aunt Helen stood beside the projector, arms relaxed at her sides. She didn't ask a question. She didn't need to. She picked up the HDMI adapter and held it out to me. I took my phone from my clutch and plugged it in. The projector screen lit up behind me, a blank white glow replacing the frozen family slideshow. My father stepped forward. Serafina, this is not the time. I looked at him. Steady. Actually, Dad, I said quietly, this is exactly the time. I opened the audio file, 14:22. The timestamp appeared on the screen, clear enough for everyone to see. My thumb pressed play. And then Vivian's voice, loud, clear, unmistakable, poured out of the outdoor speakers and across the lawn where 68 members of our family sat in the cooling Georgia evening. I didn't finish nursing school. Big deal. Vivian's real face drained of color as her recorded voice filled the air. The first thing I noticed wasn't the gasps. It was the silence. Not the polite silence that settles over a crowd during a speech, but something heavier. The silence of dozens of people realizing all at once that something they hadn't expected was about to rewrite everything they thought they knew. The recording rolled on, steady and merciless, like a confession played in a courtroom. I didn't finish nursing school. Big deal. It wasn't for me. Mom and Dad's tuition money? They owed me that. For all the years I had to be perfect. Someone at the second table set their glass down. The small clink of crystal on wood sounded like a gunshot. My mother shot out of her chair. She moved toward the projector, both hands raised, eyes wild. "Turn it off, Serafina!" she shouted. "Turn it off right now!" She was 3 steps away when my grandmother's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Margaret." My mother froze. Grandma Eleanor hadn't raised her voice. She didn't need to. 79 years of quiet authority did the work for her. She gripped the arm of her chair and looked at her daughter with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, but something deeper than that. Devastation. It crossed Grandma Eleanor's face before anger ever could. "Sit down," she said. Her voice trembled, but every word was iron. "I want to hear every word." My mother sank back into her chair like a child caught standing on a table. Vivian was on her feet now, her hands shook. The red dress she'd chosen so carefully suddenly looked too bright against her ashen skin. "That's taken out of context," she blurted. "She set me up!" But the recording didn't care about context. It kept going. Vivian's own voice, cheerful, careless, 3 glasses deep, floated across the lawn, filling the warm evening air with truths she had never planned to share. By minute 4, it reached the money. Dad's retirement account. On the playback, Vivian sounded almost amused. I've taken about $47,000 over the last 4 years. Small amounts. They'll never figure it out. They think the market crashed. Recorded? Vivian laughed. The real Vivian didn't. My father, still standing near the microphone at the front, lowered himself into the nearest chair like his legs had stopped working. The color drained from his face in real time. I watched a man who had stood up and erased one daughter to praise another realize, too late, that the daughter he'd praised had been robbing him. That's our retirement, Robert whispered. The microphone was still on. Everyone heard it. My mother turned toward Vivian. Tell me that's not true, she said, her voice splitting down the middle. Tell me, Vivian. Mom, I can explain, It wasn't like that. I was going to pay it back. The recording cut her off. Vivian's voice again. Bright, unbothered. Mom believes everything I say. All I have to do is cry, and she takes my side. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. A sound escaped her. Not quite a cry, not quite a gasp. Something in between. The kind of sound that only comes when you hear your own manipulation described back to you by the person who weaponized it. Around the tables, reactions rippled outward. Uncle Frank crossed his arms and slowly shook his head. A cousin's wife leaned in and whispered urgently to her husband. Two older aunts exchanged a look heavy with 30 years of suspicion finally confirmed. And Grandma Eleanor sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, listening with the careful attention of someone assembling a verdict. Then came minute 6. The necklace. You know what I told Mom when you were 14? That you stole Grandma's necklace? Recorded. Vivian's voice was warm with wine and self-satisfaction. I took it. I needed you out of the picture for Thanksgiving. And it worked. The sound that came from my grandmother was small, but it stopped everything. She pressed her hand flat against the table, her fingers trembled, then she turned and looked at me, not with pity, with horror, the kind that told me she was reliving that Thanksgiving. The 14-year-old girl on her knees, apologizing for a crime she hadn't committed, while the real thief stood beside her, dry-eyed and smiling. Oh, sweetheart, Grandma Eleanor whispered. I don't think anyone else heard her then, but I did. The recording continued. Minute 7. Why do you think I've been visiting Grandma? She's rewriting her will. I'll make sure my name is the only one that matters. Grandma Eleanor's grip on the table tightened until her knuckles went bone white. And you, Recorded Vivian said, leaning toward the mic like she was sharing a secret. You'll get nothing, just like always, because in this family, I'm the daughter, you're the bill. That was the moment Vivian ran. She shoved her chair back with a screech that tore through the silence, grabbed her purse, kicked off one heel, and half ran, half stumbled, across the lawn toward the garden gate, her red dress catching on the string lights. But the estate was 3 acres wide. The gate was far, and 68 people watched every step. By the garden path stood my cousin Daniel, 24, built like a linebacker, arms folded across his chest. He didn't grab her. He didn't say a word. He just stood there. And Vivian stopped. Behind her, Grandma Eleanor rose from her chair. She walked to the front of the gathering, the way women of her generation do when they have reached the absolute limit of what they will tolerate. Slowly, back straight, with a dignity that makes silence feel mandatory. Someone handed her the wireless microphone. She took it in both hands. I have spent 79 years building this family, she said. Her voice shook, but it carried. And today, Grandma Eleanor continued, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it, I learned that the person I trusted most has been lying to all of us. Then she turned to me. Serafina. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I owe you an apology, she said. Her eyes shone. I watched them push you aside for years. I told myself it would get better. I told myself your mother would come around. Her voice faltered. I should have spoken sooner. I should have fought harder for you. And I am deeply, deeply sorry. I pressed my lips together. I would not cry in front of 68 people. I would not. Grandma Eleanor turned back to the crowd. I will be meeting with my attorney Monday morning, she said. My will, as it currently stands, will be rewritten. She paused, letting the words settle. I want everyone here to understand why. The lawn went silent. I could hear cicadas buzzing in the magnolias. Not because of money, she continued, but because trust, once broken, has to be earned back. Her gaze moved to Margaret, frozen in her chair, mascara streaked, then to Robert, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. And some of you, she said quietly, have a lot of earning to do. At the edge of the garden, Vivian stood frozen, one shoe on, clutch pressed to her chest, tears carving lines down her face. I stood beside the projector, my phone still connected, the recording finished. I hadn't said a single word since pressing play. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken for me. I want to pause for a moment, because this part is still weighing heavily on me. Do you think my grandmother did the right thing? Or was it too much to announce it like that, in front of everyone? Type too far if you think the conversation about the will should have been kept private. I really want to know your thoughts. And now, let me continue. The reunion didn't end. It fractured. After Grandma Eleanor's announcement, the gathering split like a cell dividing. No one left. This was too seismic to walk away from, but the lawn rearranged itself into clusters, each one processing a different piece of what had just happened. The older relatives, Uncle Frank, Aunt Lois, the great-aunts who remembered my grandfather, closed in around my grandmother like a protective ring. Frank rested a hand on Eleanor's shoulder and said low but audible, "We're with you, Eleanor, whatever you need." A group of younger cousins drifted toward me, not accusing, not celebrating, just present. My cousin Danielle, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, touched my elbow. "How long have you known?" she asked. No judgment, just trying to understand. And then Vivian came back. She crossed the lawn with mascara streaked to her jawline, her voice pitched into that familiar register she'd used her entire life to escape consequences. "That recording was manipulated," she said to anyone who would listen. "She set me up, she got me drunk, this is entrapment." Most people looked away. A few shook their heads. Then Aunt Helen spoke. She had been standing quietly near the projector table the entire time, arms folded, watching. Now she stepped forward. "Vivian," Aunt Helen said, her voice calm as still water. "I've had doubts about you for 3 years. I told your mother, and she cut me out of the family for it." She glanced around the lawn. The recording only confirmed what I already knew. Margaret, silent until now, turned on me. Her voice was raw, stripped of polish. "How could you do this to your family, Serafina?" I looked at my mother. 22 years of swallowed words pressed against my throat. "I didn't do this, Mom," I said quietly. "Vivian did. I just stopped hiding it." I drifted to the edge of the garden, near the stone bench where Grandma used to read to me when I was small enough to fit in her lap. The noise of the reunion stayed behind me. Fragments of urgent conversations, a child asking why Aunt Vivienne was crying, the clink of dishes being cleared by people who needed something to do with their hands. My father found me there. Robert stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the ground. His face was swollen. He didn't look like a man who had just given a speech. He looked like a man who had just had one given to him. "Did I really say that?" he asked hoarsely. "That we only have one daughter?" "You said it in front of 68 people, I replied. "Dad." He winced, like I'd touched a burn. "Your mother wrote those words," he said. "She put the paper in my pocket, told me what to say. And you chose to read them." He didn't argue. He didn't deflect. He just stood there and absorbed it, the way a wall absorbs a blow. "I'm sorry, Serafina," he said, and his voice broke on my name. "I don't know how to fix this." I looked at him for a long time. This man, who'd driven trucks for 30 years, who never spoke up at dinner, who let his wife and eldest daughter write the rules while his youngest paid the price, wasn't a monster. He was something almost worse. A bystander who loved me quietly and never once let that love be loud enough to matter. "I'm not asking you to fix it right now," I said gently. Not because he'd earned gentleness, but because cruelty had never been my language. I'm asking you to stop pretending I don't exist, he cried. I had never seen my father cry in my 28 years. There was no hug, no neat resolution, just two people standing in a garden, learning how to start from wreckage. Later, I was sitting on the porch steps when Grandma Eleanor came and lowered herself beside me. She moved carefully. Her hip had been bothering her for months, but she refused my hand and sat on her own terms. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The evening had turned a deep blue, fireflies blinked over the lawn where an hour earlier, everything had changed. You held on to that recording, Eleanor said. Not a question. You could have used it weeks ago. You waited. I almost didn't play it, Grandma, I admitted. I almost walked away. But you didn't. She reached for my hand. Her skin was thin and cool, but her grip was firm. And I'm grateful. I almost gave everything I have to a liar. I shook my head. I don't need anything from your will. That's not why I— Hush, she said, squeezing my hand. This isn't about what you need. It's about what you deserve, and what's right. She looked out toward the garden where the string lights swayed in the evening breeze. Guests were beginning to leave, quiet goodbyes instead of the usual loud Whitmore farewells. I'm meeting my lawyer Monday, she said. Vivian's portion will go into a trust. She can access it when she repays every cent she stole from your parents, $47,000, and gets honest about her life, not before. Then she told me something that took the breath from my lungs. I put your name in my will 30 years ago, Serafina, when you were born. Your mother asked me to remove it when you were 6. She paused. I refused, but I stopped talking about it to keep the peace. Her eyes filled. I should never have stayed quiet. Quiet is how this family ended up here. 1 week after the reunion, the fallout wasn't slowing down. It was compounding. Vivian tried social media first. She posted on Facebook. My own sister stabbed me in the back at our family reunion. I've never felt so betrayed. The post got 11 likes, all from people who hadn't been there. Then Daniel commented, "We all heard the recording, Vivian. You stabbed yourself." 27 people liked his reply. Vivian deleted the post within the hour. The family group chat shifted next. Vivian wasn't removed by one person, but by quiet consensus. Danielle created a new chat and didn't add her. No one objected. Then my father called me on a Tuesday evening. It was the first time in my life he had dialed my number without Margaret prompting him. I pulled the retirement statements, he said. His voice sounded 10 years older. She took more than we realized. He swallowed. $47,000. Serafina, it's all documented, my father said. The transfers, the dates, everything. I closed my eyes. What are you going to do? Your mother and I are meeting with a financial advisor this week, maybe a lawyer, he added after a pause. I should have listened to you when you called. Yeah, Dad, I said quietly. You should have. The fallout came faster than I expected. The nursing career Vivian had performed so convincingly at the reunion unraveled completely. A cousin who worked in healthcare asked around. Vivian wasn't a nurse. She wasn't even a certified nursing assistant. She was a receptionist at a chiropractic clinic about 30 miles from her apartment, answering phones, scheduling appointments. She'd been doing it for 6 years. Every patient she'd saved, every overnight shift she'd described, all of it, fiction. 2 weeks after the reunion, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter with her name on the screen. I watched it ring twice before picking up. Serafina, she said. Her voice was small, smaller than I'd ever heard it. Like the air had finally gone out of the woman who had controlled our family's narrative for 25 years. I didn't know about the money, she said, or the necklace. I swear I didn't know. I believe you didn't know about those things, I replied, keeping my voice steady. But you knew how you treated me. You didn't need a recording to know that. Silence. The kind that stretches until it answers for itself. I was terrified when you were born, she said finally. The doctors told us you might not survive the first night. Then you did, and the bills came. Your father and I were drowning." She stopped, started again. "I think I blamed you for something that was never your fault. And once I started, I didn't know how to stop." I gripped the phone. Part of me, the 14-year-old girl still kneeling on a living room floor, wanted to hang up. Another part, the one that had called every Sunday for 22 years, stayed. "Can you forgive me?" she whispered. "I'm not ready for that yet, Mom," I said. "No anger, no edge, just honesty. But I'm not closing the door." She exhaled shakily. "If you want a relationship with me," I continued, "it starts with honesty. No more choosing sides. No more erasing me. No more letting Vivian write the story." She didn't argue. She just said, "Okay." It wasn't resolution, but it was the first honest word she'd said to me in 22 years. 3 weeks have passed since the reunion. That brings us to now. Grandma Eleanor met with her attorney the Monday after, exactly as she promised. The new will divides her estate fairly, but Vivian's portion is held in a conditional trust. The terms are simple. She must repay every dollar she took from my parents' retirement account, $47,000, and provide verified proof of employment and education before the trust releases anything. No loopholes, just accountability. My father and his financial advisor combed through 4 years of statements. Vivian had been skimming right up until 2 months before the reunion. My parents are consulting a lawyer, though they haven't filed anything yet. I think part of them is still in shock. Vivian hasn't spoken to anyone in the family. Her apartment is empty. A cousin drove by to check. Word is, she moved to Nashville to live with her boyfriend. She hasn't returned a single call. As for Aunt Helen, Grandma Eleanor invited her back into the family circle the very next day. 3 years of silence, undone by one phone call. Helen later told me Grandma said, "I should have listened to you. I should have listened to both of you." Last week, I received an email from my grandmother. No formal language, no legal talk. Just one line. "Come visit me anytime, sweetheart. The guest room is yours, it always was." I read it 4 times. And unlike my mother's journal entry from 22 years ago, the one that said she wished she'd stopped at 1, these words didn't make me wish they'd change. They were exactly right. It's Thursday evening. I'm sitting alone in my apartment, in the same kitchen where Vivian drank 3 glasses of Pinot Grigio and unraveled 22 years of her own lies. The wine stain is still on the table. I haven't cleaned it. I'm not sure why. People keep asking me if I feel guilty, if I regret playing the recording. Here's the truth. I didn't play that recording to destroy my sister. I played it because, for 22 years, my family told a story about me that wasn't true, and I was the only one who could finally change it. Not with anger, not with shouting. Just with the truth, spoken out loud in a place where it couldn't be whispered away. Do I wish it never came to that? Every single day. But I also know what silence would have cost me. My grandmother would have left her legacy to a lie. My parents would have lost more than they could afford. And I would have spent the rest of my life sitting at the edge of the table, hoping someone would notice I was there. I'm done hoping. Not in a bitter way, in a free one. Here's what I've learned, and maybe you need to hear this too. Silence doesn't keep the peace. It just protects the person causing the harm. Boundaries aren't about ending love. They're about ending the part where love becomes a leash. And you don't need permission to stop being invisible. Be strong, step outside the box and speak the truth. That is true justice. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story meant something to you, check the description for similar stories you might love. Where are you watching from? And what would you have done in my place? See you in the next videos.